The recorder on the conference table blinked red. Dr. Elena Voss sat with her hands folded, spine straight, watching 7 members of the hospital governing board study a folder that held 11 years of her life reduced to photocopies. "Dr. Voss," said the chairman, not looking up, "you understand why we're here." "I understand why you say we're here," she said. A ripple went through the room, not quite a laugh, not quite a gasp. Richard Halloway, chairman of the board, finally raised his eyes. He was 61, silver-templed, a man who had spent 30 years turning hospitals into balance sheets and had never once, in that time, held a patient's life in his hands. He didn't need to. He had learned that authority didn't require competence, only position, and position he had plenty of. "Then let's stop wasting each other's time," Halloway said. He slid a single sheet across the table, turned so the room could see the header before she could. "Because what I understand, Doctor, is that you built a career on paper that doesn't hold up." The room went still. Somewhere down the hall, a gurney wheel squeaked against tile, ordinary and small against the sudden weight in the air. Elena didn't reach for the paper. She didn't blink. She had been in rooms far worse than this one. Rooms where the walls shook and the lights failed and men screamed her name because it was the only word that still made sense to them. This room, with its recycled air and its careful lighting, did not frighten her. But it was about to become the room where everything she had built either held, or came apart in front of everyone she worked with. "Faking her credentials," Halloway said, reading from the paper as if she weren't sitting 3 feet away. "That's the finding of our compliance review. Gaps in your surgical fellowship record. A commendation letter from a command that, according to public records, doesn't officially exist. And 6 months, 6 full months, where this hospital has no verifiable account of your whereabouts, Dr. Voss, despite your personnel file claiming continuous civilian practice." "I can explain every one of those," Elena said evenly. "I'm sure you can," Halloway said, and there was something almost pleasant in his voice, the practiced pleasantness of a man who enjoyed being right in public. "You're a very good talker. I've sat across from you in budget meetings. You're persuasive. But persuasive isn't the same as honest, and this board has a responsibility to the people who walk through our doors trusting that the surgeon holding the scalpel is exactly who she says she is. I'm exactly who I say I am. Then explain the gap." He folded his hands. "Explain why a trauma surgeon with your reputation, a reputation this hospital built its level 1 trauma center's credibility on, I might add, has 6 months unaccounted for, a commendation from a unit that classifies its own existence, and references we cannot independently confirm. Explain it in terms this board can verify, or I am recommending immediate suspension of your operating privileges, effective this afternoon." A board member, Dr. Feldstein, shifted uncomfortably. "Richard, maybe we should." "No," Halloway said, not raising his voice, which was somehow worse than if he had. "We have liability exposure sitting in this room right now. If word gets out that we let an unverified surgeon operate on this hospital's patients for 3 years, we don't have a scandal, we have a lawsuit that ends this institution. I am not going to let one woman's mystique put 400 employees out of work because nobody had the nerve to ask hard questions." He turned back to Elena, and his tone shifted, not cruel exactly, but final, the tone of a man closing a file. "Your competence, Doctor, has become a liability to this hospital. I don't say that with pleasure. I say it because it's my job to say it." Elena held his gaze. "You're wrong about the liability. You're not wrong that I owe this board an explanation." She reached for the folder in front of her, not the one he'd handed her, her own. "But you should know what you're asking me to explain before you strip my license for it." "I know exactly what I'm asking," Halloway said. "I'm asking you to prove you're not a fraud." Elena opened her folder. Inside were 3 photographs, edges worn soft from handling, and a single sheet of paper stamped with redaction bars thick enough to blot out half the page. "This is a redacted after-action summary," she said, sliding it toward the board, not toward Halloway. "I can show you this much. I cannot show you more, because more than this is classified, and no amount of pressure from this board changes federal classification law. The gap in my record, the 6 months, corresponds to an attachment period with a special operations medical detachment. I was not, during that time, practicing civilian medicine. I was practicing combat trauma surgery in conditions I am not permitted to describe to you. Convenient, Holloway said. It's not convenient, Elena said, and for the first time there was an edge under the calm. It's the opposite of convenient. It means I can't defend myself the way you want me to. It means the only people who could verify what I did during those 6 months are men who, as far as the public record is concerned, were never anywhere near where I was. Feldstein leaned forward. Dr. Voss, is there anyone, any contact, any liaison, who could confirm even a portion of this? There's a process, Elena said. It's not fast, and it's not something I control. Holloway cut in. We don't have time for a process, doctor. We have a board meeting, a hospital to protect, and a clock. I'm sorry your service, if that's what this is, comes with these complications. But I answer to a hospital full of patients, not a unit I can't call and verify. Effective immediately, Holloway said, reaching for the phone at the center of the table. I'm recommending suspension of Dr. Voss's operating privileges pending a full external audit of her credentials. Security will escort her from. Richard, Feldstein said, sharper now. She just told you she served with a classified unit. Don't you think? I think, Holloway said, that classified is the easiest word in the world to hide behind. I've heard it before, in other contexts, from other people who wanted the benefit of the doubt without the burden of proof. I am not going to let this institution's credibility ride on a story we can't check. He lifted the receiver. Get me hospital security to conference room 4. Elena's jaw tightened, but she didn't move, didn't raise her voice, didn't beg. She had learned a long time ago that the worst thing you could do in front of a man like Holloway was show him you were afraid of losing something. So instead she simply said, quietly, to the room, "You're making a mistake. Not because I'm owed anything. Because you're about to insult people who are going to walk through that door whether you like it or not." Holloway paused, receiver still in hand. Is that a threat, doctor? It's a warning, Elena said. There's a difference. The phone in Holloway's hand hadn't even connected the call when the door to the conference room opened without a knock. It was the hospital's chief administrative assistant, a woman named Priya Anand who had worked the front desk for 19 years and had never once interrupted a board session in all that time. Her face was pale in a way none of them had seen before. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "I'm sorry, I know you're in session, but there's a situation at the main entrance. Security is asking for you directly. Can it wait 15 minutes? There are 2 black SUVs and a military escort vehicle at the ambulance bay," Priya said. 4 men in uniform. One of them is asking, by name, for Dr. Elena Voss. He said. She glanced at her notes, as if she didn't quite trust herself to remember it right. He said if she's not available in 5 minutes, he's coming up himself, and he outranks whatever security clearance this building thinks it has. The room went silent in a completely different way than before. Holloway set the phone down slowly. He looked at Elena. For the first time since the meeting had begun, something in his certainty flickered. "Who," he said, "is asking for you?" Elena stood, smoothing the front of her white coat. "I imagine we're about to find out." The door opened again, and this time it was not Priya. 3 men crossed the threshold in Navy service uniforms, and the room's temperature seemed to drop before anyone had spoken a word. The man in front was tall, weathered, somewhere in his 40s, with the kind of stillness that comes from a career spent making decisions other people don't survive not making. Silver oak leaves sat on his collar. Behind him stood 2 younger operators, both carrying themselves with the same coiled economy of motion, both scanning the room out of old habit rather than suspicion. "Lieutenant Commander Ethan Marsh," the lead man said, addressing the table generally but looking directly at Holloway. "United States Navy. I'm the platoon commander of the unit Dr. Voss was embedded with in 2019. I understand there's a question about her credentials." Holloway found his voice, though it came out thinner than before. "This is a private disciplinary hearing, Commander. I'm not sure what authority you believe you have to." "I don't need authority to walk into a public hospital lobby and ask to see the surgeon who saved my life," Marsh said. "I have that as a private citizen." What I have as a platoon commander is a responsibility to correct the record when someone's career is about to be destroyed over classified information they were legally forbidden to explain to you. He set a slim folder on the table, thinner than Holloway's, but Elena recognized the seal on the corner, and so, apparently, did Feldstein, who sat up straighter. This is a partial declassification, authorized as of this morning, specific to this proceeding, Marsh said. It confirms Dr. Voss was attached to our detachment for 6 months as lead trauma surgeon. It does not detail the operations. It confirms she existed, she served, and she is the reason 4 of my men are alive to have families. 4, Holloway repeated, as if the number itself was an accusation of his own ignorance. 4, Marsh said. One of them is standing behind me. He nodded to the younger operator on his left, who stepped forward. Petty Officer Daniel Cho, the young man said. His voice was steady, but there was something raw underneath it. Sir, whatever this hearing is, you should know I took a round through the abdominal aorta in a location I'm not allowed to name, in a facility that was a tent and a folding table, and Dr. Voss had her hands inside me for 4 hours with no blood bank, no surgical team beyond 2 corpsmen, and rounds still coming in outside. I flatlined twice. She brought me back twice. I have a daughter who was 3 months old when that happened. She's 7 now. The room did not move. And then, as if the moment demanded proof beyond words, it got one. From the hallway outside, a voice rose, a code blue call, sharp and urgent. One of the hospital's own nurses calling for a rapid response team 2 doors down. Through the conference room's glass wall, they could all see the commotion begin. A patient's family member had collapsed, unresponsive, in the visitor's lounge, and the response team hadn't yet arrived. Elena moved before anyone else in the room had processed what was happening. She was through the door in seconds, dropping to her knees beside the collapsed man, 2 fingers at his carotid, her other hand already tilting his jaw to clear his airway. She called out vitals check instructions to the nurse beside her in a voice that had none of the careful diplomacy of the hearing room. Clipped, exact, absolutely certain. No pulse. Starting compressions. Get me the cart and get anesthesia on the line now. She worked with a rhythm that looked less like performance and more like muscle memory carved into bone. 30 compressions, check. 2 breaths, check. A hand steady on the man's sternum while she called for epinephrine dosing without pausing to think about the math. When the crash cart arrived, she had the paddles charged and placed before the responding nurse had finished reading the rhythm strip. 90 seconds later, the monitor found a pulse. She kept her hand on the man's chest a moment longer, feeling it rise on its own, before she looked up and found the entire board, along with Marsh, Cho, and Holloway himself, standing in the hallway doorway, having watched every second of it. He'll need imaging and a cardiology consult, Elena said to the responding team, standing and wiping her hands, as calm as if she'd just finished signing a chart. I want him monitored for the next 6 hours minimum. She turned back toward the conference room. Nobody said anything for a long moment. That, Marsh said quietly, to Holloway, is who you were about to fire. Holloway stood very still in the doorway. The folder with its redaction bars was still in his hand, forgotten. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost the polish it carried 20 minutes earlier. I owe you an apology, he said. It came out rougher than he intended, like a man unused to saying the words. Not the kind you write into a memo. An actual one. You were doing your job, Elena said. She didn't say it to let him off the hook. She said it because it was true. No, Holloway said. I was doing the easy version of my job. The version where I get to look decisive without doing the harder work of understanding what I don't know. He looked at Marsh, then at Cho, then back at Elena, and something in his face had genuinely changed. Not just embarrassment, but a kind of recognition settling in, slow and uncomfortable. I built a career out of protecting this institution by assuming the worst about people until they proved otherwise. I never once considered that the worst thing I could do was make someone prove their loyalty to people who can't legally confirm it. He set the compliance folder down on the nearest table, deliberately, as if setting down a weight he no longer wanted to carry. I'm rescinding the suspension. Effective now. And I'm going to personally see to it that this board's credentialing process changes so that no one else who served this country in a way they can't talk about ever sits in that chair again. Feldstein cleared her throat gently. Richard, there's also the matter of the record. What's said in there, she gestured toward the conference room, doesn't stay contained unless we make sure it doesn't. I'll draft the retraction myself, Holloway said. He looked at Elena, and for once there was no performance in it. For what it's worth, Doctor, I've sat on this board for 11 years. I have never seen a physician move the way you just did. I don't think I understood, until about 4 minutes ago, what trauma surgeon actually means when it isn't a line on a resume. It rarely is, Elena said. Cho, still standing near the doorway, spoke up, quieter now. For what it's worth, I never got the chance to say thank you properly. I was under anesthesia the last time I saw you, and by the time I woke up you'd already rotated out. He hesitated, then extended his hand. Thank you. For my daughter having a father. Elena shook it. You're the one who held on, she said. I just made sure you had something to hold on to. Marsh remained near the door a moment longer, watching Holloway gather the redaction bar folder like a man trying to decide what to do with the evidence of his own mistake. For what it's worth, Chairman, Marsh said, the Navy doesn't send officers across the country to defend someone's paperwork. We send them to defend someone who mattered. You should know the difference now. Holloway nodded, once, and didn't argue. 3 months later, the hospital's new credentialing policy bore Elena Voss's name on the advisory line, not because she wanted the recognition, but because Holloway had insisted the board would not repeat its mistake without her guidance in the room. The Level 1 Trauma Center kept her name on the door of the surgical wing, and beneath it, quietly, a small plaque had been added. Not with details she still couldn't share, but with 4 words, service beyond the record. Petty Officer Cho sent a photograph the following spring, his daughter's 8th birthday, a cake with too many candles, his arm around her shoulders. Elena kept it taped inside her locker, where no board, no compliance review, and no folder full of redaction bars would ever find it worth questioning. She still couldn't explain most of those 6 months to anyone in that hospital. She didn't need to anymore. The people who mattered already knew, and the ones who didn't had finally learned better than to ask her to prove it.